Welcome to Scary Story Podcast. This episode has two stories about the household and relationship troubles that are much darker than you might be used to. My name is Edwin. Here is a scary story. Alone. It was 1991 when they found her. And I swear, even though she always told me not to swear, that not a day goes by that I don't think about her. When I lost her, lots of things left. First, it was hunger. It was replaced by the pain of having to wake up every day, feeding me until the weight became unbearable. And I took to solving my own problems with things I found around the house. The pain landed on my shoulders, and I carried it on my back until, some days, even the thought of rolling out of bed felt heavy on its own. I would finally go to the kitchen, hoping that something was still in the refrigerator and that I wouldn't, for the love of God, have to go to the grocery store. It would be sometime in the middle of the night after sleeping the whole day when I'd get hungry. Sometimes it was when the only way to know if it was dusk or dawn was to make a mental note of where the shadows were forming around the room. If it was in the middle of the night, I would have no choice but to go to the pantry, the one that Stephanie spent so much time setting up, and take a red and white can out and devour it without even watering it down, ignoring the serving suggestion. My son moved back in around 1994 or 1995, I forget, but I kicked him out. That good-for-nothing kid sold the sewing machine we saved up for back when Stephanie started her design business. And even though it was long after they finally removed her business number from the yellow pages and other phone books, when the phone stopped ringing asking for her, the sewing machine was a reminder that she had once lived here. If I tried hard enough, mainly during my most painful nights, I would hear the sounds of that motor, the bobbins and the thread rattling inside that machine. If I had left him in the house for much longer, he would have sold the refrigerator or stove? We started talking again back in the year 2000, around the time of Y2K, I remember, and he apologized for telling me what he told me. We talked about it on the porch. He was about to have a child, and I can't lie that I almost felt proud of him for not turning out as bad as I thought he would. But still, those things he told me, they were true. With that sour face of mine, I would always be alone. I wanted to. I still do. When he died in that motorcycle accident, his wife took my granddaughter with her. They rarely call. At his wake, we discussed it with anger and sadness, in part because of the situation itself. But I regret saying a few things to her. It wasn't the time nor the place. This house is too big. Every nook and corner of it has a story, a place where I remember Stephanie. Every nail she pounded into the wall, every mistake with the new paint she suddenly decided to bring to the house, and quantities of 5 gallons on her way home from a meeting. The way she made fun of my expressions and the way I sighed after knowing that I would have to set up paper and tape for her to paint the walls, and then her making fun of me for spending the next 2 days out in the garage because of the smell of paint. My imaginary headache, she would say. The staircase. The funny rug story that still makes me smile, where we thought that a long area rug would be fine to lay on top of the staircase, only to end up with it looking like a slide. The dumb rug wouldn't fold like it said on the label. We rolled it up and kept it for when we made a hallway that was long enough for it. I'm still not sure what we were talking about. I see her at the top of the staircase, her hands on her hips, pretending to leap into the slide we made by accident. I see her in the kitchen, opening every drawer on the counter, searching desperately for a rag to lift the whistling kettle, even though I told her it would be on the handle of the oven door, though I had also told her a million times that turning off the fire under the pot would also do the trick. But when I say that I see her, I mean it. Be it my imagination or confusion, dementia, or whatever you want to call it, I see her. I promised I would find her and that I would search for the rest of my life if that was required. But the journey ended early with a visit from 2 police officers. Her body, the river, her wallet. The whole conversation was a blur, but I remember what matters. My brother came to my town not too long ago and the conversation was the same. How was I doing? And then tried to poke fun at me for the memories with Stephanie. But I held back my anger this time. He got to witness the light flicker from the kitchen. He changed the topic real quick. But he had a point, and if she was still around, wasn't it because I couldn't let her go? What if she wanted to cross over, but I had been keeping her all this time? When I asked her, things took a bad turn. When I come downstairs in the middle of the night, I see her figure at the base of the stairs as it floats away toward the kitchen. She just stands there now, not doing anything at all. Her face with wide eyes looking directly at me. Her red cheeks now purple and dipped and dead. Had I started to question her existence, and that is what she was angry about? But I see her. I feel her. She's here. No, wait. I live alone. I sit by myself in a couch for 2. I cook for myself, and there's always leftover water in the kettle. I live alone, everyone says. There is nobody here. The visits to the doctor with the calming voice and the questions was right. What was there for me to process? Write it down, come on, write it down, he would say. I never could. Those old printed $20 bills still sit in her wallet, I told him. Somehow accepting her passing, but at the same time wondering why she hadn't spent them yet. I live alone. I eat, clean, and talk alone. I sit on this couch right now when I'm telling you this. Alone. But if I'm alone, then who was that? Who's that walking upstairs? Who's coming down the staircase, huh? Turn around, look at her. If I'm alone, then who was coming up next to you? You've angered her. Turn around. Look at her. Look at her. The following story is called Your Hand on My Arm, and it is coming up right after this. Your hand on my arm. We always laughed looking at the wedding pictures as newlyweds. The way her hand reached inside the sleeve of my jacket in order to touch my forearm, just above my wrist, was caught on camera. She used to say that she liked how cold my arm felt as the warm fingers crawled my arm like a little mouse, still warm from a nap. It was the way we used to sleep, her thin fingers walking around my arms, and I could tell when she was about to doze off by the sudden jumps her hands would make, twitching as she went off into dreamland. It is a little weird to talk about, I know. The weird quirks and things that we do. Though I am sure that as part of a couple, you also find your own weird things like that. Inside jokes, getting used to odd habits, and even made-up words. When we moved into the new house, things started to change between us. And I had no clue what happened. Perhaps the reality of taking care of a real home with just the 2 of us is what started pressuring our relationship. Well, at least I thought it was just the 2 of us. I was drinking coffee one morning, remembering our forced conversation from the previous night, comparing it to how things used to be. "Do you think it's going to rain tomorrow?" she asked me. I couldn't believe we had resorted to talk about the weather now. I think so, I replied, hesitating on asking Alexa about the weather the next day, knowing very well that an answer would ruin our conversation for the rest of the night. We can watch 50 First Dates tomorrow after work and order takeout. What do you think? I asked, sheepishly enough to make me feel ashamed of myself. Was I? The feeling creeped up on me all over again. Awkwardness, or embarrassment, I think is a better word, reliving last night. And how she grunted and turned away from me. How the dark room helped me envision our life before this house, and how packing and moving our things from apartment to apartment seemed to bring us closer together. I looked at a ray of light move from one corner of the room to the other. A pair of headlights turning the corner of our block. It shined on our wedding picture and ended on our darkening curtains. The ones that sink even the sunlight and turn it into nothing but a pitch-black patch of nothingness. The steps I heard from upstairs brought me back to my cup of coffee, needing once again another 30-second boost from the microwave. She was heading toward the staircase and to the kitchen to grab the water from the kettle I prepared for us every morning. She used to stand behind me, back when I was a better reader, and would lean against my shoulders to ask about what I was reading. Her hand would reach for my arm, and I recognized that tingling sensation of her warm hands against my cold wrist. The coffee wouldn't get cold back then. But this house wasn't like any other place. Some rooms felt colder, naturally colder, and others were just cold. Plus, neither of us wanted to clean the living room, and we both, at one point, spoke about how draining the house made us feel. It got us out of the house more, which was nice for a while. She complained a few times about the laundry room in the basement and eventually simply refused to go in there and had me move the washer and dryer, along with the lengthy installations, over to the side of the house. A tiny room by the kitchen. Her claims were ridiculous, but the most vivid explanation she gave me came one afternoon, when she had worked from home. I arrived to find her out on the porch, looking as pale as a ghost. She started crying when she explained to me what she had seen. She had forgotten to pick up her clothes from the dryer at night, something that didn't surprise me when I heard it, because one of her clothes needed to be taken out right away in order to stop it from getting wrinkled. So she rushed downstairs to the basement and went past the bookshelf I was working on when she spotted a figure on the corner of the basement, where the water heater was. I interrupted to explain that I had put insulation on the water heater, but she simply kept going, without complaining that I cut off her story, and she kept staring out into the street. Her eyes lost somewhere in the vision of what she had experienced, lips still moving. I stopped talking. She had seen a woman in a white dress, bending to pick up some invisible basket from the basement floor. Her hair was neat and her face was young, but her legs were twisted as they carried her unnaturally toward the other corner of the basement. I got closer to her as she explained what she felt, putting my hand on her lap. She put her other hand on my forearm. She was cold this time. She explained that her own leg stopped working when she tried to run back to the stairs, grabbing onto the crooked bookcase before falling straight to the concrete floor. From between the shelves, she could see the strange silhouette turning her face, her eyes suddenly becoming jet black, and her mouth opening wide. She was approaching with crooked steps. With feeling in her legs now, my wife started crawling toward the staircase, putting her hands directly on the last steps and dragging herself up until she was able to run up the stairs, though she was leaning heavily on the wooden handrail. All she could hear from behind her now were the creepy sounds of laughter, echoing softly through the basement. I put my arm around her, my mind still trying to come up with an explanation of what she had seen. She knew I wouldn't believe her, just like I didn't believe her when she told me that she had felt a pair of hands trying to push her down the regular staircase, or the time that the kitchen rag that she used daily caught on fire on its own. Her claims that someone was trying to get rid of her made no sense. But now I know what she was talking about. Within a week of my own experience, we had gathered our things and gotten out of that place. It was just another night. She had gotten a warning at work that day and she was in a terrible mood. I remember how easy it used to be to make her smile again, but instead I had to avoid bumping into her in the kitchen or in the living room. I stayed out in the garage until it was too cold to be there, ready to get to bed. I went to my side of the bed and she was reading a paperback book, which I found unusual, but still, I simply said goodnight and turned off my lamp. I had been having nightmares for the past several days, so I had trouble falling asleep, thinking about the figures in the room at night. A woman, specifically, floating by the foot of the bed and standing by my wife, staring at her, completely still. When I moved my eyes toward her, she would blink, slowly, and turn her neck toward me. She would blink once more and turn back to her sinister stare. No expressions, no movements. Her jaw hanging loose by only her skin, with a large, dark gash on her left cheekbone, blending in with her long, dark hair. I wasn't about to tell my wife about that. Eventually, I managed to get to sleep when I felt that warm hand on my arm. She was still awake, it seemed. Maybe she wanted to talk with me about something, but I hesitated. In the darkness, I figured I'd just ask how she was doing, so I whispered it. But there was no response. I felt her sniffle a little, her hand doing the walking motion with her fingers all over my forearm, just like she used to. I remembered the happy days again, when we ate on a cardboard box and she dared me to wear a bow tie to work the following day. I remembered her hand when we sat by the river that her parents had near their home when we first met. The way she made me laugh, telling me that her hand was a spider looking for a home. I suddenly felt goosebumps followed by the waves of chills that her hand sometimes made me feel. Her fingers ran up and down my forearm, but they lost their warmth. They became rough and heavy. Then I felt the sting of her nails breaking through my skin. I pulled my arm away and reached for the lamp. I turned around. My wife was next to me, sleeping on her side, but facing away from me. I looked at my arm to see the stripes of dripping red liquid coming out of my skin. I screamed, startling her. She sat up quickly and scooted over to me, pointing at the door, unable to say a word. I looked in that direction. By the doorway was the woman in the white dress. She looked toward the hallway. Her legs started twisting robotically away from the room. Things have been better since we moved away. The stories in Scary Story Podcast are all written and produced by me, Edwin Covarrubias. Stay in touch by heading over to scarystorypodcast.com, where you can find my email and ways to get notifications of new stories right through your inbox. If you'd rather be notified through your podcast app, simply click follow right now to get alerts when the new episodes come out. Until next time, thank you very much for listening.